So yeah, bore da and welcome, good morning and welcome. Diolch I bawb am fod yn rhan o'r gweithdy yma. Yeah, thank you all for logging on and taking part in this workshop, which is going to last for an hour. My name's David Jones and I'm Menter Moon's Food Project Manager, and I look after the Neges and Larder Cymru projects. I'm really looking forward for today's workshop that Larder Cymru is going to be hosting, and the subject is on social value within the food supply chain. Today's session will be recorded and will be sent out after this, and the slide will also be sent out after the meeting. If you have got any questions, please feel free to post them into the chat function. Bydd sesiwn heddiw yma yn cael ei redeg trwy'r Saesneg, ond mae croeso i chi roi cwestiynau yn y chat yn Gymraeg os ydych chi eisiau, a na ni tri'n gorau ateb nhw. The theme of this morning's workshop, as I've already said, is social value within public procurement. And over the next hour, we will give you an overview of the social value requirements in the public sector procurement. We'll discuss the opportunities to improve supply within the public sector in Wales using social value. And we'll also go through the way of measuring social value, which will enable you as producers to better prepare for the public sector opportunities, and will be also useful for the people working in procurement that we have with us. So the public sector in Wales spends about £90 million on food and drink annually, and recently there is a growing emphasis on using social value within the contracts that are awarded. So it's important that everyone in the sector understand what's required. And just a bit about Larder Cymru, for those of you who may not know who we are. So Larder Cymru is focused on supporting, preparing and enabling suppliers to access public sector opportunities of facilitating collaborative links between buyers, suppliers and other key stakeholders. So if you go to today's agenda, so we'll start off with Greg Parsons, who will be sharing the latest development within Larder Cymru and the insights that we have gained through the existing supply routes and requirements of public sector contracts. Greg has over 30 years experience in the food and drink industry. He works with Larder Cymru to make food and drink SMEs ready to supply the public sector through a dynamic approach to public sector procurement. He enjoys working with food and drink SMEs on specific challenges, opportunities and business planning, and he also owns a dairy business in the southwest of England and is the chair of Food Drink Devon since 2021. That will be followed by our guest speaker, Ashley Morgan from the Social Value Portal, and then Mary Arthur from Cynnal Cymru, and Katie Palmer, who works for Food Sense Wales, before we go back to have a presentation from Meredith Davis, and I will close at the end. Yeah, on to you, Greg.
Good morning, everyone, and bore da, and I'll just try and bring up the presentation for today. I know some are still joining, so I'll start slowly, but to make sure I keep to my 10 minutes. So Larder Cymru obviously is the more recent iteration of what was formerly Mon Larder, and so we've been working on similar objectives over the last 4 years, really. And here are some of our key aims. Really, we're just hell bent on trying to open up the public sector to incorporate more local suppliers, and more small and medium-sized enterprises, and create what is a really necessary part. And talked about much now, a resilient supply chain, And obviously we know that in some areas, whilst our objectives are to increase the level of Welsh produce in particular, in some areas that's going to be more of a long-term plan, particularly in areas such as produce. But we really need to start now just to make sure that we have the foods available. We talk about shortening supply chains, and with that, whilst we sort of don't always shout about local, we recognise that in some situations, shortening the supply chain can just be UK supply, it could be pan Wales supply, or it could be from just down the road. But I think what's important is that we take a realistic approach. By shortening supply chains, we can generate greater social value, which we're going to talk about through this workshop, but also reduce our impact on the environment and reduce our carbon footprint as well. So, but importantly, using the phrase shorten supply chains as opposed to local leaves more flexibility, enables us to work in a realistic way. So through workshops such as today and previous workshops and future workshops, we hope that we can make the supplying into the public sector more clearly understandable and accessible for SMEs in particular. And increase awareness of some of the requirements. And we do have run workshops, and we'll run future workshops on things such as accreditations that might be required. And like today, helping suppliers and buyers to understand how different key initiatives can play a role in the supply chain. And I suppose being straight and open and honest about it, and taking the focus away from purely being about price, which, again, being open and honest about has probably been ensconced as the main driver in public sector supply historically, but thankfully there's now a realization that we really need to think beyond that. And also what we do encourage is SMEs to collaborate with each other, whether that's actually bringing together and supplies together to make it easier to get into the public sector, whether that's working between wholesaler distributors and producers to ease that supply chain, whether it's simply sharing best practice as we do with some of our supply lead groups. So there are our key aims. In terms of just focusing on social value and the importance of that, Wales, ahead of some of the other home nations, is really on the front foot in embracing and embedding social value in everything that is done really through the Welsh government, and that's very relevant for the food sector, and that affects really both ends of the chain, as I explained just now. Is that at one end we know that public sector buyers, of which there are many on the call today, are considering and understanding better the impact of not just the price paid on the day, but the longer term effect of buying goods that are within the region that they're going to be consumed, and the economic value that generates. And at the other end, what's really important is that suppliers and producers understand the importance of social value that they generate through their supply, but probably just aren't aware of the specifics or aren't able to measure it. And that's a key piece of work that Ashley will touch on in a little while, and I'll come back in and explain a bit more about a bit later. But in terms of the work that Larder Cymru is doing, and has done since the outset really, is to just highlight the importance of social value in public sector supply. And whilst it seems like a new thing, we've been talking about it for at least 3 years, and the Social Value Act dates back to 2012. So it seems new, but it is something that's been kicking around. But there's a massive and really healthy focus on that in Wales right now. So social value plays a big part in what we do. Also, we've, over the past few months, developed a very close link with working with LASA. This has been driven largely by the fact that the joint initiative around free school meals was announced late last year, and it's now started this month, and will roll out gradually over the next couple of years. But for us, we kind of thought, well, actually, whilst we'll still focus on all elements of public sector supply, there's an opportunity here in the time that we have to really home in on how we can help the school meal sector to embrace what is both a really significant challenge, but also an opportunity, and use that as a leverage to increase the amount of Welsh products that are served on school menus. So working with LASA, who are very influential in this sector, extremely knowledgeable, and really bring together the suppliers, the distributors, producers, and people like ourselves, key stakeholders. We attended the Public Sector Catering Expo at the NEC in March, which we found extremely informative, and as I say, that was broader public sector. But then again, we attended the event in July, the main event, focused perhaps a little bit more on school meals. in particular. And again, it was a very useful event. We took with us some lovely Welsh produce, and our objective there was twofold, really, was to both increase the awareness of the support that we have available to support the supply chains in Wales, but also take some of those suppliers over the border as a potential supplier to the English public sector and beyond, with products that we presented which were particularly fit for public sector establishments, the right portion size, the right nutritional and the right cost parameters. Also, we've been working with some chefs. Merlin's been leading this project to develop some menus that are particularly focused around, obviously, Welsh produce to start with, but meeting the government buying standards for food, nutritional requirements, meeting the seasonality requirements, and most importantly, meeting portion size and cost requirements. And that's work that we'll continue to make more available as the project rolls on. Really important to us is our work with our leads, both on the public sector side and on our supply side. And one of the things with this project, since we relaunched in the early part of this year, is we're trying to stretch more pan Wales and working with suppliers outside of North Wales, because we see a really significant opportunity to get everybody who wants and wills more local produce to be used in public sector to be aligned, and making sure that we're, where we can, avoiding duplication, but all coming together to try and make this happen, not just for the foreseeable future, but for the long term as well. So it's great to stretch our legs beyond just North Wales and bring those people together. And incidentally, you know, we are at the moment working to coordinate an event with LASA in November that will serve as a joint event, but specifically for the Welsh public sector, and we'll provide more details on that in time. So I think that was my update, David. Happy to take any questions along the way. I think I probably need to. Have I stopped sharing?
No, I can still see your screen.
Okay, well let's put paid to that. But as I say, happy to take any questions now or later, and I'll pop back in a bit later to support Ashley in his presentation as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Greg. That's excellent. So our next speaker will be Ashley Morgan from the Social Value Portal. Now, the Social Value Portal is a solution that allows organisations to measure and manage the contribution that their organisation and supply chain makes to society. The solution allows organisers to report both non-financial and financial data, and rewards organisations for doing more good in the community. So, yeah.
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Let me just try and share my screen. So I'm really going to kind of, with 10 minutes, just kind of touch the tip of the iceberg, really. But the aim here is just to give you a bit of a flavour and introduction to who we are, but more importantly, how to measure social value. So let me dive straight in. So I think Greg's already touched a little bit on this, but I think it's important just to think about the story of social value. And I mean, you know, the term social value has been around since 2012, but in reality, doing social value has been around for much longer than that, as we're all aware. But what's quite interesting is the momentum that's come since 2012 in the past 10 years, as we kind of take that Public Services Act from 2012, where, you know, councils were asked to consider social value within their public sector procurements, and moving forward into the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is obviously where you guys lie around directly reporting against the 7 goals within that particular act. And what's quite interesting more broadly is the social value model from UK central government has put a mandated minimum 10% weighting. This has had a bit of a, it's given the industries, both public and private, a bit of a kickstart in terms of actually embedding social value properly and reporting it, and it's really increasing momentum actually in reporting. There is a private sector need, of course, to deliver for their public sector clients, but in all honesty, it's becoming much more broad than that, as social value kind of becomes part of that ESG agenda. What is social value? There's lots of definitions. This is ours, but what we're talking about really is the umbrella term for social, economic and environmental effects of an organisation's activities and actions. With regards to the public sector specifically, they're looking at the additionality that can be delivered in relation to public pounds spent. So they're not necessarily looking at the kind of the impact from the goods, works or service that's been bought, because that inherently is going to be delivered. They're looking at reporting that additional value. It's not to say that the inherent value is not important, it is, but when they're evaluating within the public sector, that's purely what they are evaluating. Who are we? I'm going to talk about this very, very quickly. It's not really the purpose of today, but Social Value Portal, for those of you who don't know, we are an organisation. We've been around since about, we've been an organisation driving the social value agenda since about 2015. The core of our business was something called the National TOMS Measurement Framework, which is what we've adapted for Wales, which I'll come on to in a second. This is the core of our business, and this is what all of our clients and non-clients actually utilise to measure social value in a consistent way. We support the framework with an online tool, which is what our clients pay us for. This allows them to capture social value data in a pretty consistent way. It provides them some nice tools and dashboards, and allows them to speak a coherent language and a consistent language across all of their activities. And then we also have a consultancy team which provide things like social value strategy, local needs analysis, and kind of then wrap around consultancy services. We work across the UK. I'm head of public sector. We've got about 120 public sector clients across the UK. In Wales, we work with Powys, Cardiff, Caerphilly. We work with Wrexham University, which is relatively new, and we work with Hywel Dda. And you know, I think as I come on to it, the momentum in Wales is building for sure, slightly behind the UK, but not in terms of delivery, actually, just in terms of where we're at. But I think what's quite interesting here is that we used to work with just a lot of local authorities. We're now working with anchor institutions. Doesn't really matter what public sector they are now, and I think as that conversation and sorry, that alignment between the language that they want to use to talk about social value, doesn't matter if they're in health, housing, local authority, central government, you name it, that they want to find a way to talk about social value and also evaluate it consistently. So how do they do that? So before we go into it, I think it's just worth stepping back. So we actually released the first iteration of the National TOMS Measurement Framework back in 2017, and we've updated it every year. It's become the leading methodology in social value measurement across the wider UK. What happened in about 2019 is that we started to talk to Cardiff actually at the time, and a couple of other councils and public sector, and we said that the TOMS is great, the National TOMS is great, but it doesn't speak our language. It doesn't speak the language of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So what can we do? So we pulled together a group of predominantly public sector organisations at the time. Some of the people actually on this call today, I see, who helped work with us to develop a consistent measurement framework, essentially to adopt the National TOMS into something more meaningful for Wales. What we end up producing collectively is the National Social Value Framework for Wales, the TOMS for Wales. So what are they? TOMS stands for themes, outcomes and measures. So in the National TOMS, we've got, in the National TOMS for Wales, we've got 7 themes reflective of the goals within the Welsh Act. We've got what we say 40 core measures. In fact, there's a ton more measures than 40. There's actually the list in Wales is very, very long, but we say it was 40 core because we feel that most organisations, this is a good starting point. You know, it's going to capture some things that they're going to be doing. It should capture actually the majority. But the purpose of the TOMS was to take the National TOMS, to take the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and the Community Benefits Toolkit and create something which kind of pulled all them things together in one framework. So we use a lot of statistics to create what's called proxy values from the Green Book. It creates a level playing field. It allows benchmarking and comparability. It's really about having one language across most sectors, almost all sectors. It's sector agnostic in a way which allows people to just get on that social value journey. Next slide. It'll catch me up. So what does it look like? Now, this is just a snapshot, and I don't want to kind of blow people's minds, but the National TOMS for Wales is really, really large. The aim really is that not that all of these measures are applicable to every single organisation. It's designed to be a menu for some organisations or some bidders, for some private sector companies and some SMEs. They might be doing 3 measures or 5 measures or 6 measures or 20 measures. We don't really mind. It's there to be a menu for you to be able to capture the activity which you are delivering, and you can deliver on contracts. Similarly, from a buyer's perspective, is that they take that big list of whatever 40 and then might say, actually, for our region, only 30 really relevant. So we'll just focus on them 30. It's really to be a guide. You can see we've got the 7 themes. For each theme, we have a series of outcomes. Each outcome has got a series of measures. We then have a unit, which tends to be quantity, pounds spent, number of CO2 emissions saved. And then each measure, or almost all measures, not every measure, has what's called a proxy value. This is the financial value. This is the cost benefit analysis. So if I do X, what is it worth to society based on the publicly available data that is there for us? Now that becomes useful because it becomes helpful within procuring for the evaluator to have some kind of benchmark against each other, some comparability of supplier A versus supplier B. And similarly, through reporting, it allows, you know, a housing association and a local government to speak the same language, have a comparability around what they're delivering. Now, it's worth stating here that that proxy value is not the be all and end all. It's just a snapshot. It's just some insight. What's really, really important, and this is through the evaluation, but also through the bid submission, and also through the ongoing measurement and reporting, is that the qualitative element is just as, if not sometimes more important than that proxy value. Without the data, it's sometimes hard to understand what's meaningful, you know, what is the true value. But similarly, without the story, without the people and the case studies, the data is actually quite cold and meaningless. So it's about bringing them two things together in equal measure if possible. So it's really, really important that you keep that in mind when you are either bidding or reporting or measuring social value, that you don't just take the proxy value for face value. And each measure within our framework has got an evidence requirement. So it's quite simple, but it's to say, look, if you're going to do this, this is the way in which you describe it. Next slide. So yeah, so you end up with this framework. You can create a total social value for whatever that contract, activity or an organization is. It's very, very simple. As I say, it's a menu, it's a list of things that can be done. Sorry, my computer seems to be about 2 seconds behind me. There we go. I'll jump right ahead. So I'm going to summarize now. We'll just talk about the movement, because I think this is important. As Greg said, the Social Value Act came out in 2012. And it feels like, as I said before, the momentum is really changing. But I think it's still important to accept that the maturity around social value is still quite immature, still quite young across the whole of the UK, not just Wales. Not so much that doing the social value is immature, because lots of people are delivering great social value, right? But the consistency of its application, whether it be in procurement or the consistency in which it's reported or measured within an organisation. Our suggestion is to learn by doing. You know, I think that sometimes these things can be, you know, if you look at the TOMs, you think, crikey, I don't know where to start. But actually, if you just pick 3 or 5 measures that you know you're already doing, well, that's a great place to start. You can start to capture some data and build that momentum and understanding. We find that whether you're a buyer or a supplier, or actually just a corporate, you know, the social value needs to be part of your DNA. You know, I think from a buyer's perspective, it's often just seen as a procurement thing because of the Social Value Act. But actually, it needs to be those who deliver it best have really got social value ingrained in their organisation. Similarly, for those who are buyers and perhaps responding to bids, you know, particularly for SMEs as well, we find that whoever's writing the bid is often having to almost start from scratch sometimes with each bid response. Well, actually, if they already have a framework of measures which they know they're already applying, and they know how they can be applied locally if relevant, well, then they can feed it through. But a top-down approach is always best, even if it's very, very simple. It doesn't have to be complex. For those who are aware of the national TOMs, we've just gone through it. Well, we're just writing the update at the moment. I think it's due out in Q4, where we update the proxies. We're actually limiting the framework a little bit just to make it a little more simple. Greg's got his video on here. So Greg and Hugh's on the call as well, Hugh Griffiths. And so I'm actually going to hand over to Greg just to talk about, we've had some conversations around the food TOMs. TOMs for food, which I think is really interesting. So Greg, why don't you share our latest update?
Yeah, so I think, you know, it's been an ambition for some time to sort of perhaps provide a simplified method of measurement that can be easily adopted by SME food and drink businesses, because our worlds are already very complicated, and if we don't have something that is fairly easy to grab hold of, then it simply won't happen. So we've assembled a small group of which we have public sector representation, as Hugh's been very proactive in it, with the social value portal team, but also with producers and logistics providers, to sort of talk about what might be the appropriate way, as an appropriate set of key measures that are easily adaptable and adoptable by food and drink SMEs, but also really mean something in the public sector food and drink world, and importantly are going to deliver social value in the region in which the food is supplied and consumed. So we're getting close. Who's done a great amount of work to kind of bring forward some suggestions as to what out of the, I think, 96 options might be the most important ones to focus on. You've lost my, I don't think that was me, but my camera's gone. Yeah, so that's work in progress, but we hope to be able to bring something forward in the next couple of months, and that will be a focal point in the event that we intend to run in November. So I think that's an update from myself on that, really. Ashley?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, no, it's exciting, and I think it's just to make things more specific. In reality, there's not going to be a huge amount of difference, but it's about making it more relevant, more specific, and make it more appropriate for your sector. And the final thing I'm going to finish now, because I've gone a minute over, is about upskilling. Just having resources to upskill and educate the sector and Wales and the UK, to continue to build that momentum. So we're about to launch what's called Social Value 101. So there'll be some free resources available through the Social Value portal soon, and we're launching an e-learning platform as well. But on our website, there's a ton of case studies, there's a ton of free resources, there's a ton of guidance around social value measurement and the TOMs and blah blah blah. So for those who do want to learn a bit more, feel free to get in touch with me, or similarly head to our website, and we've got a ton of free resources there. So I'm gonna hand back there. Apologies for going slightly over.
No problem at all, Ashley. That's great. Thank you very much. Now that we understand what social value is and how to measure it, let's see how we can work towards these goals. I'd like to invite now Mary Arthur, who will give a talk on the real living wage, the Welsh food system, creating social value through accreditation and procurement. Mary is an expert in sustainability and strategic communication. Previously, as the director of Cael Cymru, she was instrumental in transitioning the charity's funded model to generating independent revenue, deliver sustainable development advice and support across all sectors throughout Wales. She continues to work with Cael Cymru, promoting the real living wage throughout Wales and ensuring employers from across sectors with accreditation. And she's been instrumental in establishing the Mid and West Wales Living Wage region, which was launched this year. So over to you, Mary.
Diolch, David. Ydych chi'n gallu gweld sgrin fi?
Ynddo, dwi'n gweld hynny.
Lovely, thank you. So yeah, diolch yn fawr fi yw Mary, fi'n gweithio yn agos gyda Cael Cymru. I work closely with Cael Cymru on the living wage agenda in Wales, along with a number of other partners, including Welsh Government, some public bodies, Citizens Cymru Wales, Cardiff University, local authorities, looking at how we can promote the living wage accreditation as part of the Fair Work wider agenda. So this is just what I'm going to be touching on today. I'll move on quickly so we can get stuck into more information about what the real living wage is. So every year there's an independent group that comes together to evaluate what basket of criteria they need to analyse to come up with a real living wage rate for that next year. So it's looking at what families really need to get by. So it's calculations overseen by the Commission, the Living Wage Commission, and they are working hard at the moment with the cost of living crisis, and just touch on the difference between the real living wage and the national living wage. A few years ago, the national living wage was the minimum wage, and the UK government have renamed that the national living wage, and it does still cause a lot of confusion in organisations that are looking to accredit. So it applies, the real living wage, the line in blue there, applies to all employees over 18. So obviously the minimum wage is under 25s and the national living wage is over 25s. So it recognises that all people over 18 do the same work and have the same costs as everyone else. And in the table you can see the national living wage is based on a percentage of median earnings and only paid to over 23s. So for example, on the real living wage, a worker will approximately earn about £770 per year more than a worker on the national living wage. So the new rate every year is announced by the First Minister at the start of the Living Wage Week in November. However, due to the cost of living crisis and high inflation, this year the new rate will be announced next week, 22nd of September, by the First Minister. So this is to give existing employers more time, because we are, obviously everyone is expecting the rate, the real living wage and the national rate next year to increase quite a bit. So this will give employers enough time until May next year to uplift their workers onto the new rate, and any new accreditations from now on will need to pay the new rate as well. So that's just covering that quickly. So in Wales, a few years ago, about 6-7 years ago, the Living Wage Foundation partnered with Cyngor Cymru. So we are the accreditation body for Wales. And since 2020, since COVID, actually, we've seen a big jump in the number of employers that have accredited in Wales. It's more than doubled. So we've seen a huge uptake in accreditations, which we think is likely due to the focus on low-paid workers, difficulties in recruiting and retaining staff, and businesses needing to show how they value employees. And this slide is just to show you very briefly the process of becoming accredited. So to accredit, obviously, you need to pay all your directly employed staff the real living wage, which at the moment is £9.90. And then with the whole on-site contractors, we do expect a living wage accredited employer to have the conversation with any contractor, anyone subcontracting who are working on site for more than 2 hours a week for 8 weeks in a row, to have a conversation with them about their own staff that are working on site to be paid the real living wage. So we expect eventually everyone in receipt of money from that accredited organisation to be receiving a fair wage. That we can support you with during the accreditation process. And the form itself is really simple. Again, we can support you with that, but it's a very simple online form. So this is the basket of the the broken plate report. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but the one thing I'd like to highlight from this is the proportion of people on low pay in the food sector remains substantially elevated compared to the wider economy. And as you can see there, 45% of workers earn below the real living wage. So just looking at these two graphs now, the top graph shows the difference in the food system and the percentage of workers paid in light green below the national minimum wage and in dark green below the real living wage. So we can see that those areas of kitchen staff, catering and waiting staff are lowest paid, but manufacturing, wholesale and agriculture still have between 20 to 30% of workers paid less than the real living wage. In the bottom graph, the line in orange, shows a little bit more of a positive trend, that the percentage of workers being paid below the real living wage has declined over the last few years. So the vision of the Welsh food and drink sector sets out that the proportion of food and drink sector employees receiving at least the Welsh living wage, they call it, but it is the real living wage rate, will increase to achieve 80% by 2025. So the public bodies that we work with, the First Minister made several announcements saying that he does expect people in receipt of public money to show their journey towards accreditation. So we're working with a lot of public bodies at the moment. When we do a place-based approach, for example, Cardiff is a living wage city, we see a lot more support through the PSBs for living wage, and accreditation follows quite quickly. So the local authorities that we're working with do take on quite a leadership role under the living wage place movements. But in terms of creating social value, and we've touched on the wellbeing goals a few times this morning, so we have evidenced how the real living wage can benefit all 7 of those goals. I won't go through them all now. A lot of them are self-explanatory as well, for example, Prosperous Wales. But even with a healthier Wales, Public Health Wales research recognises that a sufficient income is a prerequisite for good health as well. So we've got more information on that. If you need that from us, you can follow up with us at the end. Just quickly as well, the Living Wage Foundation commission Cardiff University every few years to do a survey and research on the benefits of the real living wage. I mean, it is difficult, a really difficult time for workers, but we recognise it's a really difficult time for organisations across all sectors as well. But the benefits of accreditation and for the local economy bring benefits to businesses as well as those in receipt of the real living wage. So you can see here that a massive 81% of all accredited employers show that they've benefited from enhanced reputation, also improved retention and recruitment. So the Food Cardiff group have recently relaunched earlier this year, I think, and recognised the role that the real living wage accreditation can play. Now, it is different. The people can pay the real living wage. Accreditation is different, as we've touched on earlier, by that whole supply chain influence as well. So they support Cardiff to be a sustainable food place and social value it can create by linking in with fair wages and the real living wage. Sorry, I'm just rushing through these now. I just want to make sure I get everything in. So the 2 places that we focused on to date. So Cardiff is a living wage city, has achieved all the goals they set in, well, 3 years ago, because the first action plan is now being revisited, and we're going to relaunch Cardiff as a living wage city this year. And Mid and West Wales has established itself in January, and we're going for accreditation this September. Well, hopefully by November, but we're submitting our application plan this September. So obviously that will have a big focus on agriculture and food. And we have met with the AAP, and we're launching that plan in Gweithdy in November on the Tuesday, on the 15th of November. So just to look at the benefits that the place approach has had in Cardiff. So we're looking at an additional 39 million that's been invested into the Cardiff economy, and the number of accreditations in that one place, and all the sectors that have benefited from that place-based approach. So working with sustainable food places and the place-based living wage approach as well. We're going to carry on trying to have an influence across the public sector. And just to finish off, I'm not sure if the next slide is showing, but it's just our contact details. So there's the Living Wage website that has more information on all of this. Sarah and Grace are available. And just to highlight that next week is the new rate announcement, and Living Wage Week in November will have a series of events pan Wales, including the launch of the Mid and West Wales region and the Cardiff as a city region. So diolch fawr, David.
Diolch yn fawr, Mary. Thank you very much. It was really interesting, really, how giving a living wage can hit so many of the well-being goals. Talking of which, one of the other well-being goals is to create a more resilient Wales, and Katie Palmer will now share her experience and outline how we can build resilience through social value. So Katie is the program manager for Food Sense Wales. She has an MSc in nutrition from King's College London and in food policy from City University. She's worked in food for over 20 years with experience both in the private and the public sector, and also in the third sector. She's currently a member of the Food and Drink Wales Industry Board and is a founding member of the Veg Power Board. She also sits on the WLGA's School Holiday Enrichment Programme Advisory Group and was one of the team of 4 who created the multi-award-winning Food and Fun programme in Cardiff in 2015. So, yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me to speak today, and yeah, just tell you a little bit about Food Sense Wales. So we're a charity that's hosted within the Welsh NHS, and we are aiming to influence how food is produced and consumed in Wales. We deliver and support a number of programmes, and we work with others on the policy agenda through Food Policy Alliance Cymru to drive positive change in our food system. So I've got kind of 3 things in mind to talk about today. I probably being completely overambitious in terms of how much I'm going to talk about, but I have done a bit of a summary slide with lots of links for further information, so that'll be available to you afterwards as well. So I want to set out the current situation with regards to our food system, and it's, you know, to talk about really why it's critical that social value forms part of the backbone of our thinking. I want to illustrate where our current food system is failing through highlighting some facts and figures from the Food Foundation's most recent Broken Plate report and the Size of Wales's Global Responsibility report, and offer up some practical suggestions on how to build social value into business and the public sector. So hopefully give you some tangible things to think about in terms of that Tom's framework as well. And I guess also just to highlight that businesses will need to be looking at this very closely, because we have the public social values and public procurement bill going through the Senate at the moment, and businesses will have a statutory duty. There will be a statutory duty on certain public bodies to consider socially responsible public procurement when carrying out procurement. And to set objectives in relation to the wellbeing goals, and to publish a procurement strategy. So public sector bodies are going to need to be doing this, so suppliers are going to need to think about how they can support public sector to do that. And I suppose just to start, I guess I'm going to give you the statistic that we know in Wales that while this was around March time, so the situation maybe have become much worse since then, that around 14% of the population in Wales is living in food insecurity. So I'm just going to pick up on a couple of slides that I presented at a Welsh Government Food Poverty Roundtable back in May in response to the cost of living crisis, as I think it's important just to set some of the bigger picture stuff out. So we face 2 interrelated challenges, that of the cost of living crisis that's resulting from the pandemic and geopolitical events, and the food system crisis, which actually has been in the making for decades, but in the global north at least, its fragility is only now really being exposed sufficiently for us all to be taking note. This fragility is caused by an erosion of the connections within our food system, and from excessive global trade, which is dependent on fossil fuels. And it's happening at the expense of indigenous communities, natural ecosystems, and our own health and well-being. And because we're so reliant on the global food system, we find ourselves exposed in the light of the situation we find ourselves at the moment. Russia and Ukraine are major suppliers of energy, as we all now know, and food, as we all now know, and fertilizers. And Ukraine also supplies 2/3 of the migrant labour to pick British foods. Supply has caused input costs to skyrocket and the availability of things to decrease. But what we're seeing is that, because supermarkets want to keep food prices down, they're squeezing suppliers for cheaper products. But producers are facing rising costs and staff shortages. So instead of upping production to meet demand, they might opt to cut their losses, put fewer plants in the fields. We've seen that, fewer animals out to graze, and the margins just aren't worth it, or they might even be making a loss. So major retailers may go elsewhere, seek produce from abroad, and then that creates more global inequality, more greenhouse gas emissions, reduces domestic resilience to global shocks. And in Wales, what we produce and what we consume and what we should be consuming for human and planetary health don't align. And that's why if the long-term plan is to have a healthy and resilient food system, we need to build a collective vision to plan and deliver one. I just put this slide up because I think it illustrates some of what I've just said quite well. And looking at actually over the course of the challenges that we have at the moment, we know that big food and big oil companies are all actually making a lot of money, while we have increasing levels of fuel and food insecurity around us. And it's just interesting to pick up on some information that Sustain have just published for an MP's briefing on building good food, local food infrastructure. A job is created for every £42,000 turnover of a small and medium enterprise, an SME food business, compared to 124,000 turnover at a supermarket. And if the market share of local SME food retailers increased to 10%, this would create 200,000 new jobs across the UK. And of course, you know, we are a country of small and medium-sized enterprises, so these figures are really relevant to us. And the gravity of the situation that we have at the moment with regards to food insecurity, public health crisis, and you know, the loss of livelihoods we have at the moment has become really urgent. We know that we have an increasing mental and physical ill health cost. And we have soaring NHS bills, and we know that around a third of our 4 to 5-year-olds are overweight or obese starting school. And we know that households earning less than 30,000 a year are buying fewer fresh veg because of the increase in the price of groceries. And the societal cost of obesity in Wales is £3 billion a year. We face a deepening of the nature and climate crisis, resulting in a collapse of the ecosystem that we rely on for food supplies, and 1 in 6 wildlife species in Wales is at risk of disappearing altogether. We know that global food systems are responsible for 42% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and we also know that we're risking losing our coastal and rural communities and threatening our Welsh language and heritage. Because of the challenges that producers face. So I just wanted to kind of illustrate some of this. I don't know where other people can actually see the detail on the slides here, but the Broken Plate report from the Food Foundation documents the health of the food system, how it impacts on our lives and why we need to change the food environment so that it delivers healthy and sustainable diets for everybody. This first slide just highlights that the poorest fifth of the UK households would need to spend 47% of their disposable income on food to meet the cost of the government recommended healthy diet. This compares to just 11% for the richest fifth. We've already Mary's already mentioned the challenge around wages in the food system. So 22% of workers in the food system earn the national minimum wage or below, compared to 8% of workers across the whole of the UK economy. And we know that more healthy foods are nearly 3 times as expensive per calorie as less healthy foods. I'm going to skip through that slide because I can see that I'm going to struggle for time. I'm also going to skip that one as well. So it's interesting just to look at advertising spend as a bit of a marker of how social value is being displayed across where we're our own environment. A third of food and drink, food and soft drink advertising spend goes towards less healthy food, compared to just 1% fruit and veg. And then this does translate into a bit of a catalogue of poor health and environmental outcomes, which I'm not going to go through all of these now, but I think it's just worth saying that, that by 2050, emissions from our food system are going to be 4 times higher than the level that is needed if the UK is to meet the net zero target. And, you know, we also need to be thinking about our global responsibility. This is a slide from the size of Wales, which talks about how the rainforest is being cut down at an alarming rate. I don't know what's happened to that slide. Oh, hang on. And that's really important because carbon is absorbed by tropical forests. The Amazon absorbs more CO2 each year than that's given off from aviation, for example, and up to 70% of this carbon is being stored in soils for the long term. So a global responsibility report from RSPB Cymru, WWF Cymru and the size of Wales found that 40% of the size of Wales is required to grow Welsh imports of cocoa, palm, beef, leather, natural rubber, soya, timber, paper and pulp every year. And 30% of this came from high or very high risk areas for deforestation, habitat conversion and social issues such as forced or child labour. So I'm going to whip through some slides now very, very quickly just to say, you know, what practical things can Welsh businesses do to look at supporting these social value ambitions. So for businesses thinking about social value, they can think about it in terms of the environment, the social aspects. So Welsh Government has a strong vision to build a strong and vibrant Welsh food and drink industry with sustainable supply chains that have a global reputation for excellence and having one of the most environmentally and socially responsible supply chains in the world. And this is the food and drink vision for Welsh Government, and they're developing some tools to support the food and drink sector in Wales to meet this ambition. One of these is decarbonisation training from Food Skills Cymru, which is launching in September 22, so this month, and this series of decarbonising training workshops will help focus on raising the awareness on the importance of moving towards net zero. From a health perspective, there's a number of different areas of work and campaigns that you can businesses can get involved in. From Veg Power, which is about on a mission to make it easier for kids to eat more veg through positive advertising. Peas Please, which works across the whole of the food chain to drive up veg production and consumption. And by taking a look at the Eat Well guide, which is the government recommended guide. The Real Living Wage, Sarah's covered if we're looking at social aspects. Sarah Mary rather. We're also looking at other areas such as how to promote and add value to the Healthy Start scheme to support parents and children with fruit, veg and milk purchase. Schemes such as Food and Fun, and also the sustainable food partnerships, so the network of sustainable food partnerships that are currently building across Wales. There are now 7 partnerships which are taking a place-based approach to developing a cross-sector food partnership, including local authority, public sector bodies and third sector organisations, working collectively to develop a vision, strategy and action plan for making healthy and sustainable food a defining characteristic of where people live, and working cooperatively to realise this vision. And there's a list of the partnerships there, and there's many more evolving at the moment. And finally, these are more kind of general actions that you might want to think about. And I think just kind of highlighting the sustainability cluster with Food and Drink Wales and investing their B Corp accreditation. And there's actually a grant available for looking at that as well. So there's information there and links for you to look at that. And also looking at how you can get involved in the conversation. So Wales Climate Week, which is coming up in November, and the draft Food Wales Bill, which is currently out to consultation and close on Friday, if you want to have a look at that. And I'm aware I've completely whizzed through that and gone over time, but hopefully this final slide we can share, which provides all the links that you need. Sorry for the rubbish start, by the way.
No problem at all, Katie. That was great. Yeah. I'd like to pass us on now to Meredith Davis, who is the supply chain lead for the Larder Cymru project, and who will be sharing the next steps for Larder Cymru and how we can help you. Meredith has 15 years experience in supporting and facilitating businesses within the food supply chain and trade development. He established his own food and farming consultancy in 2018 and is working on a number of trade initiatives, including here with Larder Cymru. So over to you, Meredith.
Diolch, Dafydd. Diolch am y cyflwyniad. Thank you for the introduction. Dwi jyst eisiau amlygu gefnogaeth a'r ffynonellau gwybodaeth bellach sydd ar gael trwy Larder Cymru. I just want to highlight really the support and the sources of information that is available through Larder Cymru, a pwysleisio bod gefnogaeth honno ar gael yn ddwyieithog hefyd. Larder Cymru is a collaborative project in every sense, really, in terms of who we engage with, the type of stakeholders that we have are from across the supply chain, from production right through to suppliers, wholesalers, those involved in procurement, buying, catering managers, and so on. So I think over the last few years, we've developed really a good understanding of public sector procurement, and our focus is on public sector procurement of food and drink. The website lardercymru.wales, we are currently updating the site and uploading all relevant information onto that, which will also include a recording of today and the PowerPoints that have been shared as well. So I'd encourage you to periodically view the website or look at the website if you're looking at specific aspects or want to recap on certain workshops and things that Larder Cymru have done. Socially, Larder Cymru is hosted by Menter and we're using the Menter platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on, as the main communication tools for Larder Cymru. So just want to flag that the website is there. There is a sort of resource library in that, and then that we are collaborating and communicating through the Menter site as the host organisation. I suppose the main thing really I want to share with you, those of you who are producers on the call, especially that as an initiative, as a project, we can support you on a one-to-one basis, be it that you want to look at the opportunities in public sector supply as a whole, or want to actually look at specific aspects, as we've heard today, be it social value, the living wage, sustainability credentials, and so on. We can support you through Larder Cymru to do that on a one-to-one basis. We understand that not one size fits all, and sometimes support needs to be tailored to your individual needs, and we can do that on a one-to-one basis. We have sort of staged that support really in the main to make sure that we meet whatever needs that you're looking to address. And also we want to see action, we want to see things moving forward. So the critical thing for us really is that there is some kind of an action plan, to-do list if you like, that we can support you then to deliver and deliver the results. David is the main contact if you want to sign up to the one-to-one or wish to have further discussion. Please get in touch with David, myself, or Greg Parsons, who's also we've heard from this morning. We're currently in our autumn series of workshops, which is one of the other aspects of Larder Cymru as to how we communicate, share information, and so on. Today, an online workshop, we focused on social value. We're currently finalising a date for the end of October, possibly into early November, on a collaborative in-person event with Lisa Wales, looking at the opportunities from change and Welsh school meal provision specifically. And I'd like to congratulate all of you on the call who have been involved or are involved with Welsh school meal provision and what you've achieved since Key Stage 1 pupils went back earlier this month or last week for most of you into schools. A fantastic achievement. And then in November we will have another online workshop more aligned to supply and producers, but looking at the expectation of supply into the public sector. We're very much aware that frameworks, different types of public sector institution, be it local authority, health authorities, higher further education and so on, will have different expectations and different routes of supply. So we'd be looking at that as one aspect in our sort of online November workshop. And just the key message really is to get in touch. David has just shared his email address and contact details on the chat there. Public sector procurement is changing. And we heard Katie just as an example talking about the public procurement bill, but change in my mind brings opportunities. So whether it's on production, manufacturing consolidation, and change also in how public sector is buying and the requirements, and really just consider how food and drinking Wales can be used as a force for good. So on that sort of whistle stop of how Larder Cymru can support you on one-to-ones especially, and the workshops and the resources in the website, I'll hand over to David to formally close the meeting. Diolch.
Let me take myself off mute for a second. That's great. Thank you very much, Meredith. And yeah, thank you to all of our brilliant speakers for taking part today. Thank you also for everyone for attending this workshop. I really do hope that you found value in attending. Our next workshop will be on the 12th of October, and we'll circulate more information regarding this in the next couple of days. As Meredith said, please remember about the free one-to-one support that's available for food producers throughout Wales. To do in a variety of topics to do with public sector procurement. If you need further information or support, have a look at the Larder Cymru website or contact myself. I've posted my details in the chat. And yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn am ymuno, a gobeithio gewch chi ddiwrnod da am gweddill y heddiw yma. Thank you all for attending and hope that you have a great afternoon.